the big debate, high carb versus low carb. There are so many opinions on this at both ends of the spectrum. But the thing is, it's not quite as straightforward as people make it sound. It's not binary. It's about balance and using carbohydrates strategically. In sports nutrition, we talk about the concept of fuel for the work that's required. And this is key. I'm going to go through this more in this video. I'm going to break it down for you so that by the end, you'll have a clear idea of when and why you should use carbohydrates and how to actually fuel your training properly and safely so that you can stay healthy but have the performance gains alongside it. Now, people assume that I am all about the carbs all the time, but it's way more nuanced than that. I've done videos on this sort of topic before, and if you read the comments, it would seem like I only advocate high carbohydrate diets, high fueling all the time. But that's not the case. But if we haven't met before, hey, my name is James, and I'm a registered sports and exercise nutritionist. I work with amateur and pro triathletes to help them take the guesswork out of nutrition so that they can train, recover, and race faster. All right, so where does this whole topic come from? It stems because we have two main sources of energy, and that's fat and carbohydrates. Now, in a healthy diet, both of these are absolutely vital, and neither should be demonized. Now, you might have seen I posted a video where I went through Lionel Sanders' diet, and I've done other videos on low carb diets for triathletes. And you get people at both ends of the spectrum in the comments section saying carbohydrates are absolutely vital and you shouldn't actually eat any fat. You can't get diabetes if you don't eat fat. And then you get people on the other end of the spectrum who say you shouldn't be consuming any carbohydrates. You should have low carbohydrate or ketogenic diets. And the reality is that both are important. So fat is crucial for cell structure, for creating different hormones, for absorbing fat-soluble vitamins. And then on the other side of things, carbohydrates are critical for performance, especially at moderate to high intensity. And your brain also loves glucose as a fuel source and will preferentially use it. Now, yes, you absolutely can survive without consuming carbohydrates. You can make your own glucose via a process called gluconeogenesis. We know that, and I don't dispute that. But the problem is, this isn't enough to fuel high-intensity training regularly. You don't create enough glucose via gluconeogenesis to do this, and you'll compromise your performance, especially at high intensity. And this is clear from the research, and unless you want to ignore it, is undisputed. People cannot train at high intensities if they follow a ketogenic or true low-carb diet. Now, there's a concept here for you to understand, and that's that the harder you work, the more carbohydrates you will burn for energy, and this is non-negotiable. At your VO2 max, you will rely almost entirely on glucose, or perhaps entirely on glucose. And this is because you need to be generating energy quickly, and importantly, without oxygen. So you undergo anaerobic respiration, or that's how you produce energy without oxygen. Glucose gets metabolized and broken down, and one of the byproducts here is lactate. It generates energy very quickly, and that's important. That's how you sustain those high intensity bursts. The problem is here that fat can't be metabolized or used for energy without oxygen. So it requires oxygen, and it's a slower pathway. It can generate huge amounts of energy, don't get me wrong, but it can't keep up at high intensity, and your body will preferentially start burning glucose. And even at lower intensities, most people will burn a mix of fat and carbohydrates for energy. And you can improve your fat metabolism over time. We know this. You can become better fat adapted. You can burn more fat at higher intensity. So you can push that up. but you'll never get to the point where fat can outperform glucose for top end performance. Even moderate to top end starts to struggle. So fat adaptation definitely can help with long duration, slower, steady state work. But realistically, that's the limit. So do you need to consume carbs before every training session? The short answer is no, you don't. It depends on things like the intensity, the duration, your overall training load. Remember that concept that I talked about at the start, fuel for the work that's required. More effort means more carbohydrates. So let's put this into some practical guidelines for you. If you're doing a truly easy session, then 30 grams of carbohydrates per hour is often enough to support your body without fully relying on carbohydrates. Now people say, well, why don't you just not consume any carbohydrates? Or if you consume those carbohydrates, you're going to limit your fat burning potential. Well, actually, we know from the research that if you are consuming a relatively low amount of carbohydrates, so 30 grams of carbs per hour, there is still plenty of fat oxidation happening. You are still going to be burning a significant amount of fat. So for example, if you're doing a 4 or 5 genuinely easy long ride, you could mix protein, fat, so things like maybe nut bars, as well as carbohydrates to help balance your energy intake. So it doesn't have to be about smashing carbs the whole time. But then as the intensity increases, that's where you want to add in more carbohydrates. So if you're doing a moderate intensity session, it might be 40 to 50 grams of carbs per hour. And then as you go to harder intensity sessions or intervals or race simulation, you might be aiming to consume 60 or 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour, depending on the duration and your effort. Then the other thing to really understand here, and this is what people miss when they get so binary about carbohydrates or fat, is that your training volume matters too. If you're doing 15 or 20 or even 30 hours a week, like some of the pros that I work with, your overall energy needs are so high that carbohydrates will form a huge part of your diet, regardless of the session intensity. Because if you're doing 5 to 6 hours of training per day, you just have to get energy in. And actually, simple forms of carbohydrates like energy drinks or gels are a fantastic way of doing this. Now, this whole concept is something that I go into in way more detail in the Tri-Fuel Academy, which is my triathlon nutrition course, which is included in a membership to the Hub. This is my complete package for triathletes to help them with their nutrition. And inside that, there's a module on low carbohydrate diets, how to use them properly and strategically for performance, as well as the mistakes to avoid. So if you're interested in really getting to grips with your nutrition to support your training and your race performance, then check out the Hub. Link is in the comments and description of this video. So the real takeaway here is that it's not low carbohydrate, it's not high carbohydrate, it's smart carbohydrate use. Don't be afraid of carbohydrates, just learn how and when you should use them. Think of them as a training tool. So use them to support quality, intensity, recovery. And when you don't need as much carbohydrate, then you can stop or not have as much and start to reduce it down. Now, if you're underfueling, whether that's low carbohydrate or just low energy intake overall, you're more likely to see your performance decline. You're more likely to see poor recovery and run into issues with relative energy deficiency in sport. So this is RED-S, it's a syndrome where you can have different negative health consequences from underfueling. But there is a good amount of research now suggesting that actually carbohydrate is integral to this. So it's not just about low energy, it is about chronic low carbohydrate use. And this is really why I am so passionate about this and making sure triathletes understand the importance of fueling with carbohydrates at the right time. So if you want my practical take-home advice here, learn your training demands, understand your intensity zones, and fuel accordingly. Don't be afraid to use carbohydrates. They are valuable and they are important for high intensity racing and recovery. But it doesn't mean you have to smash them all of the time. It's about doing it strategically to help you train well consistently over time. Now, if you're interested in more of these nutrition videos, then you can check out either of these two here to help you get to grips and really improve your training, racing, and recovery.